Hi, I'm Howard Holton here with Sweet Spot. Today we're interviewing David Smethurst, oil and gas CTO for Hitachi Ventura. How you doing, David?
Very good, Howard. Thank you.
Welcome. Excellent. So we wanted to talk today about the oil and gas industry. You've been in the industry for how long?
About 30 years.
And what did you do in the oil and gas industry?
Most of my time has been primarily in engineering and operations. However, co-founding a few businesses in engineering as well as automation and in software. So my big goal in even being involved in the industry was around optimization. Continuous operations improvement has always been a part of the industry, and that was an area that I like to focus on, both in the US and in Canada.
Oh, fantastic. So when I think of oil and gas, I think of two things, probably like most people. I think of making my car run and the news about oil spills.
Right.
But I have to assume that the industry is separated into market segments, into business segments. What are those kind of big segments?
It's three segments, actually, three business segments. First is upstream, which are considered exploration and production companies. And so that can include the service companies with them, so drilling, completions. And then it goes to midstream. So midstream are the pipelines and the transportation. So that could be trains and trucks as well. And then you go downstream, and downstream includes refining and petrochemical. In the case of petrochemical, it's doubling in size simply because of the products, petroleum-based products that are being produced today.
And there's some like 4,000 plus petroleum products.
Yeah, I don't know what the number is. All I know is I surprise a lot of people when they hear that it comes from the oil and gas industry.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, it was interesting. I remember the revelation when I found out that plastic was an oil-based product.
Right.
The number of products that are discovered from, as a side effect of oil, I would say,
yes,
is shocking and amazing.
That's right.
Shocking and amazing.
Yes, I mean in a typical place, whether it's a synthetic, could be paint, it could be sulfur-based products. If you ask someone to live without these petroleum-based products, you'd be surprised what life would be like.
Sure.
So it's not always tied to the car. It's not about gasoline per se.
Right. It's been an interesting evolution. When we talk about data, it's very common. Data is the new oil. Mm-hmm. And I've heard a lot of comments from people, they don't like that particular analogy. But I quite like it. And I like it for that very reason, right? The initial goal was heating oil,
right.
Lamp oil, excuse
right.
me, and then heating oil.
Right.
And as we continue to refine our process, we find more and more uses for the totality of that oil,
right?
What we bring out of the ground, not just the refined piece that makes fuel, but even the kind of the cast-offs, right? We continue to find use for what previously may have been left over, may have been discarded.
No, that's right.
We continue to evolve and find use for, which I think is really interesting because that's kind of the data story, right? There's the data that's core to your business and been core to your business, and the new oil. Right, the new data frontier
right.
is finding uses for data that you previously didn't find use for.
Right.
So what does that mean for oil and gas?
Well, oil and gas has been creating data for many decades. As a matter of fact, the digital oil field the vision around it was to create data to get better insight into your business and go from reactive to proactive. And so how do you do that when you have a changing environment, you have commodity prices changing, and unfortunately, they would have these radical swings. So they would store all this data. And there was a time, and it still does exist, where in the upstream, so these are geological people, working on all of this information, they'd put it somewhere, and then they'd spend half their time trying to find it again. So that's just one area. And you think of the size of these data sets. I mean, we're just talking significant.
Sure, it's 3D geodata, right? So
right.
It's incredibly massive data sets to try to build an image about what's under the substrate, under the soil.
That's right, exactly right. And of course, from the business side, so there's always been a discrepancy or a disconnect between the corporate office, which can be fairly digital, meaning desktops and everything else, compute power, and then you have the field where these assets are. And so even today, the vision around connecting with real-time data and being able to get real insight, do the analytics, is still a vision, and it is working to some degree. However, if they can't monetize that data for them to go and ingest more data, when they want to do, connect more devices, IoT or automation, which is, again, another driver, but also even to get to that artificial intelligence level, they need to first of all, get the data management under control. And then on top of that, deal with the demographic swing. Because right now, the aging workforce within oil and gas, a lot of the millennials are coming in and they actually embrace automation.
Sure.
So the timing right now for this data to become the new oil, to bring in more data, to automate more, you actually reduce risks in the operational side of things. You're able to get better insights, so even to insure those assets, your risk models change. So it's a great time to be in oil and gas. And as a matter of fact, the demand is going up, not down. And again, it's not tied to the car. It's tied to all these other petroleum-based products that are in demand. Consumption continues to grow.
So oil and gas is kind of thought to be a sunset business, right? Again, we tend to think of the energy produced from what we pull from the ground, and not the totality of what the products that oil and gas brings. So it's thought to be a little bit of a sunset, right? With renewable energy on the rise, electric vehicles on the rise, but that doesn't necessarily appear to be the case.
Well, again, when I look at the energy sector, so as a CTO of energy, oil and gas is our primary, but we know the oil and gas industry also invests in alternative energy. The challenge is the cost. So it's a transition of going into these alternative energies and looking at ways to improve on that, even though there are hydrocarbons. I think it's still 200 years worth of hydrocarbons. It over time will eventually change in how we manage and use this energy. And again, there's a thing called cumulative effects, which is the environmental impact, the social impact, and the economics. And as economics improve, we'll see a better transition of countries and people embracing that. But depending on where you are in the world, they will move quicker, such as Europe, right? They need to look at having less cars on the road and having a different infrastructure.
For sure. I think that's a common thread, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like everything, right? It's this big arc of evolution. I think every place will eventually catch up. It's a little harder in places like Africa and Australia,
right,
where the range of an electric vehicle is a huge problem. Even
right.
in the U.S.,
That's
huge
right.
problem. Canada, huge problem. But Europe makes a lot of sense.
Right.
It's the size of New England, and it's relatively dense with population centers.
Right.
So an electric charging infrastructure isn't the nightmare. Now, I will say, Hitachi's currently working on a project in London, because while regulation has occurred to force a move to electric vehicles, especially in the city of London, the last time the electric infrastructure was upgraded was post-World War II, when they were repairing it from some bombing.
Right.
So the big stress, and we're seeing this more and more, is if I add 5,000 new electric cars or 50,000 new electric cars, which is what London's looking at, what does that change in the energy producing infrastructure? Mm-hmm. Have you seen the effect or impact or discussion about that?
Yes. So as a matter of fact, within Itachi and with our partners, looking at power grid optimization. So where we look at a few different areas: water management and the power and utility side. And so we look at infrastructure in general, and how Hitachi needs to, how the cities or the countries need to invest for the future, and determine how best they can manage the timing around that. And what we're finding is, on the water side, they're running out of water. On the power side, they don't have an infrastructure in place to even come close to supporting that. So when you look at these power grid optimizations, this is certainly an area that the energy business, so oil and gas and a general collaboration, we've been involved in, but it's also very common business challenges,
sure,
including the data side of it.
Sure. Well, the data side there is very difficult, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a full IoT project.
Yes.
So when you're talking about not having good enterprise information management,
right,
and that kind of causing a problem, I can't activate the data that I have now.
Right.
Well, the evolution is going to demand more data, whether you're ready for it or not.
Right.
Right. And so the challenge becomes, I almost have to leapfrog where I'm at, and drag the old with the new.
Right.
And that's a difficult conversation to have.
Yes. And I was just thinking of the this whole IoT, connecting more devices, and then the AI, the expectation of this machine learning, that truly is the automation that will come into play with electric cars and self-driving cars, et cetera, right? So that it's going to be interesting, but to do that and to do that in real time, you're adding a lot of new technology. Yes.
And oil and gas, what's their technology experience level? Like, how mature are they as organizations when it comes to technology?
Well, the topic of technology, though, in oil and gas ranges from the computer or compute power to technology that relates to the subsurface. Again, looking at data, being able to literally understand what the subsurface environment looks like, to the types of drill bits they create, to the type of software that you need to even move this data. So you look at a drilling rig today. To modernize a drilling rig is, from a safety point of view, they actually want to have less people. They're able to do it remotely. So the technology could be from the physical infrastructure side to the equipment to right down to the desktop, and then of course the communication side of it. Bandwidth to be able to even move this data, and as I say, get to that ultimate real-time data capture to prevent things or be more proactive. There's just so many areas of technology that's to be considered, and North America certainly is leading in that. Between the city of Calgary and the city of Houston over the last 50 years, they've driven most of the broad-based kind of technology, and then of course now collaborating with the Silicon Valley has become more common in the last 2 or 3 years than it ever has been.
That's excellent to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So we know Silicon Valley, when it comes to technology, is generally relevant.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a fair statement, regardless of the industry. What about Hitachi Ventura makes us relevant in oil and gas?
Well, actually, it's part of the reason I even joined Hitachi. When we look at all of our experience, both from an operational point of view, manufacturing point of view, already having some equipment with predictive maintenance already built in, we have so many examples and so many resources that we can bring together. And even recent wins in the business of solving major data problems is giving us the brand equity in a business that wants to know less about the presentation and more about the engagement and delivery. And so it's been great to be creating this operational bridge for them to understand. So an oil and gas company, when they have to solve a business problem, it's broken down into asset teams. We're able to talk their language, be able to look at what do they have and how can we enhance that versus rip and replace. So no, I think we're doing very well in not promoting, but delivering these outcomes.
Excellent. It also must help to be part of Hitachi Limited.
Yes.
Right, we have 830, I think, sister companies.
Yes.
Some of which are in the energy production business.
Right.
Our company got started. We were just at headquarters, right?
Yes.
We were at the HEBC.
Yes.
And we saw the
first electric motor.
The first electric motor built in 1910. Was it 5 horsepower?
5 what? Yeah, 5 horse. No, yeah.
10 horsepower?
I can't remember, but it was impressive. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Right. So we've been in energy for a long time, and
yes.
And to your point, right? Not only does Hitachi Ventura have these predictive maintenance tools, but Hitachi Limited has been using them in production, in energy production for quite a long time.
Absolutely.
Right? With a high level of success and a high level of automation.
Yes.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of moves out. So most companies, most verticals, most businesses are looking at cloud and have been doing cloud for quite a while. What does cloud mean to oil and gas?
Well, cloud, it was a big reluctance to take that risk in putting their data off-site. And but what they've been realizing, especially recently, is it provides scalability. So you look at most oil and gas today is a global business, and they are in remote areas. So for them to be able to take something, standardize it, streamline it, and simplify it, the cloud helps or enables that. And so we know, and even in recent opportunities, we're working with drilling rigs. Without the cloud, we would not be able to scale the way we are. And even working with partners or bringing in third-party solutions to work with us, the cloud has really been able to help us do that.
That's fantastic. So, so you and I have talked a fair bit before this about oil and gas, and we were talking the other night. And one of the things that I think is obvious from the improvements in using data and kind of adding IoT is really around reducing the environmental impact and the kind of marketing value around that, right? If I can reduce the environmental impact to what we do through things like BP or a pipeline spill, that's a fantastic win overall, right? There's monetary gains to be made there. There's loss reduction in lawsuits to be made there. There's also marketing value, right, to be done there. But you clued me into something I hadn't even thought about that.
The insurance industry.
Not to lead in too much, but yeah, the insurance industry.
Yes.
I find that really intriguing. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yes. So a number of years ago, one of the software companies I had co-founded, we had looked at the well life cycle and knowing that the risk management 10, 15 years ago was very high. And the cost for a producer, an oil and gas producer, was quite significant because when they were underwriting or going to get their insurance, the list of questions on the risk model that they had, they couldn't answer them. If they drilled 100 wells, what type of information could they give from when it first is producing right through to where it is in its current state? So recent meetings with a reinsurer is asking that same question. How do I insure a company that either has a lot of information of their assets or predicting, and understanding the amount, from a health and safety point of view, from a production point of view, right? Understanding what is the potential production or output that a well could produce, or how many times can I prevent any issues of an explosion, of someone being hurt. And so now with the increase of data available, in the increase of the analytics providing me that data, all of a sudden I'm dealing with real-time flow and pressure. I can determine a leak before it happens or if it's a small leak, that you're now getting insight into pumps failing or compressors failing. So these are all things that an insurer now looks at and says, wow, these guys will prevent a lot of these concerns around major issues that would require cleanup or environmental challenges that are millions and millions of dollars. So it's an area that it is also forcing, in some cases, if people are reluctant to invest further into their data, now they see a return, and it's an operational return that not everybody thought about.
And what kind of return are we talking? Are we talking
it's in oil and gas,
thousands,
millions. It's millions of
millions?
dollars. Like a 1% improvement on almost anything within oil and gas is millions. I mean, we have a scenario where working in a pipeline and getting it up 40% faster is $30 million just in one area alone. So again, proactive versus reactive, it's big savings in many cases.
Sounds tremendous. So, so let's talk about that kind of predictive alerting around pipeline leaks. What does that translate to? Like, how does that work today? And then what does that mean in savings or value to the business once we've gone proactive? Okay. So how do they handle it today?
Well, that's interesting. So I'll answer the second part first in regards to the savings. We don't normally tell them how much they'll save. As a matter of fact, what we say is we'll give them what we are addressing, meaning if it's a pipeline and the pipeline has real-time data capture, and we're now predicting when we want to do the shutdowns, it's planned, it now has the ability, so downtime is a big concern anytime in oil and gas. So you're putting all these things into play, they know right away what that savings looks like. The only reason the earlier quote on the 30 million is because they came up with that number based on time.
Sure.
Right? And so by giving that insight where you can determine a pinhole on a leak, whether it's oil, gas, or water, that is a proactive state that they can quickly address the issue and get back up and running. And so that's why I say, and predictive just says that the anomalies from the data that you get to know if a compressor, because there's our compressors and pumps always going, that's really how you will get these kind of outcomes. And makes a lot more sense because when you can automate, or like for instance, a control process, you're able to automate that through artificial intelligence. You still have operators involved,
sure,
but you've taken a lot of risk on your downtime or other issues. Yeah. It's great.
So currently leaks occur,
Yes.
right? How long does a leak generally, like, how long does the leak occur before it is repaired?
Well, depending on what part of the world you're in, but sometimes it can be days. They have planes that fly the length of a pipeline. So depending, again, if it's below ground or above ground. So you have a lot of different issues. You also run what's called a PIG. They run them under high pressure through and try to look at the pipeline integrity as well. So there are different ways to do that. Unfortunately, because you can't get the data real time,
Sure.
or you can get it near real time depending, again, what kind of coverage, there's always a delay. And delays
cost money.
A lot of money.
Yep. And so automating that reduces that delay by some amount. Do you have any idea what that amount might be?
Again, it's going to be based on a pipeline. And you need to also understand that pipelines are tied in from where the well site is.
Sure.
Right? So that's a pipeline going into a main pipeline. And the pipelines are the arteries of the industry. So you're dealing with pipeline right from a wellhead all the way through to crisscrossing countries and borders. And so it can really range, and it also ranges in size depending if it's oil or gas, high pressure. There's a lot of variables.
Interesting. So let's say I'm a account executive, and it's my job to sell my products, to make my quota, and to make inroads in new customers. Mm-hmm. And I've got an oil and gas company, and let's say they're an upstream oil and gas company, and I need to send an email to say, hey, this is who I am. I'm Hitachi Ventura, and this is what I can do for you. Do you have any tips for an account executive in that situation?
Absolutely. First of all, when you look at the roles of oil and gas, one of the primary roles is a VP of operations. So if you want to, I've often heard or been asked to, we want to meet with the C-suite. Meeting with a senior executive in any industry, you either are as well informed in not only their business, et cetera, but when you look at a VP level, so they are the ones, whether it's in finance, operations, or even on the IT side, preferably those three together as in a meeting. But when a good tip is look at what the VP of operations, whether it's through LinkedIn or even understanding on their website, what they talk about sustainability, what they talk about their operations improvement plans, because often operations improvement should align to their digital transformation plan. And often a VP of operations, if you contact them through their admin and you talk about digital oil field optimization or incremental improvement, that often gives them the context that you know something about the industry, but also starts to align with what does incremental look like. Because anything dramatic in oil and gas, including they don't like the terminology to make disruptive.
Sure.
To make things disruptive, that doesn't work for them. So as I say, and that's often where I'm helping people is look at the operations conversation first. And then like most of our meetings, we start to look at how would we solve those things? And it usually starts with data management and then goes into looking again where they can improve or take risk out of the equation. And you'd be surprised at how engaged finance, because they need to live by the numbers. You can't measure it, you can't manage it. Yep. And it's a regulated environment, so everybody has a stake in that.
It's interesting. So you and I are both on the CTO team.
Yes.
And it's interesting sitting here. We have the same kind of conversation over and over, right? Mm-hmm. It's about de-risking. Right. It's about incremental improvement, right? It's about reducing cost. It's about operational efficiency. All of that seems to be a common thread regardless of your industry. Right. And yet the value is in that 20% bridge, right? 80% is common, and the value really is in that 20%, understanding the digital oil field. Right. Understanding that disruption for other industries might be good, but inside oil and gas, it's either not good or they're just exhausted.
That's right.
Right.
Well, and they've also had a history of spending a lot of money. As a matter of fact, some of the customers we're getting today, they've already invested in ERP applications and everything else, but they're not getting the output or the outcomes that they're looking for. So you don't necessarily have to be an oil and gas specialist, but you need to know there is a legacy or a history of technology that hasn't met the objectives. We're not going in with a box of solution, a point solution. We are really going in, addressing a number of areas with our experience, stuff we have today, and with our partners to address an area that, again, we're getting great results because, one, we do know that we start with an operational context. So IT to OT is what we are doing today. And as a matter of fact, many of our customers appreciate that we're not all talking about, as you said, as our CTOs, we look at the business outcomes and work with our regions, the country managers, to really let them know what an engagement and delivery model looks like.
Fantastic. Well, this has been great. I want to thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
And we'd love to have you back sometime.
Excellent. Thanks, Howard.
Thanks, David.
You bet.